That alone, verse number 9, the indifferent recluse in me, growing on both sides in a blossoming state, is the one vine which has come, spread out, and risen to the top of a tree. Remember that hell does not come to the man dwelling in contemplation beneath it. Commentary. In the last verse, there was also a reference to a tree. It was bearing 5 kinds of fruit. 5 birds, representing the 5 senses, were flying around and enjoying those fruits. In a note of drastic action, a hunter, belonging to the same context as the tree, shoots at the 5 birds and brings them down. This implies an inversion to verticalize the horizontal tendencies of the birds. Now we have the same picture revised in a more peaceful, contemplative manner. The whole life situation is once again symbolized by a tree. In a sense, the tree represents the historical duration of consciousness. We are already familiar with the 4 alternating states of consciousness: the wakeful, the dream, deep sleep, and the transcendental. The wakeful and the dream states are conceived horizontally, while we think of a vertical core rising from the deep sleep state to the transcendental. We do not know anything in deep sleep, and the transcendent state passes unnoticed. What remains is the alternation between the wakeful and dream states. Thus, the space of our everyday living is filled either with wakeful experience or dream experience. Our wakeful experience cannot make any sense if the external items are not meaningfully related to an inner consideration of their worth or value. A glorious sunrise comes, you turn to it and say, "How wonderful!" Outside is the sun, inside is the wonder. The love for the beautiful is embedded in us. Even when no beautiful thing is presented, the capacity to appreciate beauty is still within us. Everything which happens in wakeful life has a corresponding urge, interest, or value vision lying buried in the deep unconscious. This is the causal factor which produces the effect of what is experienced, called sushupti or suptam. Suptam is the state of the unconscious, but it is not by any means empty. Like a seed pod, it has many seeds embedded in it. These are called vasanas. Some of them are cyclic in their manifestations. For instance, there are certain kinds of lilies which flower only at a particular season. You can bury the bulb in your garden any time, but it will lie there dormant until its proper season comes. Then it will flower forth. There are other kinds which are not seasonal. They just go on blooming. Whether seasonal or unseasonal, the seeds of all our experiences lie buried in the garden of our unconscious. Now let's talk about the dream state. Where do all these images in our dreams come from? There is a myth-creating tendency within us which is capable of finding appropriate symbols to make a language like that of a fairy tale. This is lying buried in the same place as the urges of the wakeful state. It is a common repository from which wakeful life and dream life are both manifesting. The wakeful and the dream are both causally related to the deep unconscious, where the seeds of all these concepts are lying in wait. seeking to be promoted in one way or another, either as an actual experience or, if an actual experience cannot be promoted, then as a dream experience. Freud and others think that a dream is the expression of an incomplete wakeful experience, a wish fulfillment, or a prophecy or premonition of the mind. There is a secret in all this. Where is all this happening? It all happens in the individuation of consciousness. The individuated consciousness comes from the non-individuated consciousness. Non-individuated consciousness has no time. Time is a factor which only comes as a part of the structured functioning of the mind itself. The human mind can act only through a series of interrogations. Manas. After manas comes chittam, association with memory, buddhi, judgment, and ahankara, affectivity, based on the value assessment. This completes one unit of mental activity. Almost immediately, the next unit comes. We cannot attend to 2 units at a time. We can only go from one to another. In this way, the mind becomes sequential, and the idea of duration is created. Time is essentially a way of looking at the movement of the conscious mind. We have made devices like clocks and sundials, but these are not time. Time is a kind of memory knot, or an aid solely fabricated out of the human mind. The mind also needs to be able to place things in some kind of setting. If there are 3 objects before us, they should be placed in a certain way so that they can all be separate from each other. Composition is another of the mind's functions. It is like an artist arranging items when he wants to paint a still life. He puts the vase and flowers in a certain way, with some other objects on the table placed just so. If he puts them all in one place, it would be difficult to distinguish the outlines of one from another. So he has to spatially separate everything. If the same artist wants to paint a forest or a panoramic view, he still has choices to make, although the scene has been composed by nature already. He may not choose to paint many small shrubs and trees. He might isolate one big tree, then 2 other trees, a stump, the lake, and part of the hill. Out of the many elements, he selects some and omits others. Then he structures them to suit his sensibility. Similarly, the mind structures its own spatial and temporal compositions, basically for its own convenience or to suit its level of understanding. This goes on within a grouping of several minds as well. The world is already a complex phenomenon, structured by the compositions of many minds. This is the world tree to which we have come, to sit before it in contemplation, and also to send our twin vines of objectivity and subjectivity on the journey of growth and extrapolation along its trunk. The Guru begins the verse by referring to the 6 states. These are the state of being before birth, growth, transformation or evolution, degeneration, and final extinction. Everything comes out of the state of eternal being. Then it is born into the process of becoming as an individual. It grows, changes, gets old, and finally it dies, disappears, vanishes. This is true of everything that transpires within the waking state. It is also true of our dreams. Before a dream comes, the element of it and the reason for it are lying buried as a necessity in the seed state. When the seed is expressed as a dream, it sprouts into fantastic forms full of meaning. After a time, as another seed presses forward for expression, interest in the previous one wanes and it disappears. In our wakeful life, a particular necessity arises out of many potential necessities. It assumes a certain reality, a certain form. At that point, the necessity becomes very categorical, a hard and fast imperative that can move us to action. Finally, it is either fulfilled or its importance is slowly lost, and the interest dissipates and is gone. In this verse, a certain creeper is branching into two and flowering forth as these wakeful and dream experiences. The deep sleep state lies hidden within us as a ground or seedbed of tremendous potential. It is an unconscious mass. Like Pandora's box, we do not know what good things and bad things lie buried in it. When once life begins to function, the creeper comes up out of its seed, a new baby. Like Deva here says, my time has not yet come. Leave most of it buried. Every day I will express just a little bit. She programs little smiles for 2 minutes, then one scream, then back to a smile. Then she has 15 minutes of loud screams with a variety of expressions, and then she goes back to sleep. But next year she won't sit in anybody's lap. She will push everyone away and be busy exploring everything. In the process of the realization of the self, we are always trying to attain the state of the transcendental. The transcendental or the witness is here separated from the tree. The Guru symbolizes it by a contemplative who sits under the tree of manifestation. About him, many things are happening. He sees that all these things are going on, but he just sits there, seemingly unconcerned. He is not sitting there as a careless hobo, though, because the creepers are always growing in all directions and covering everything. Although with his detachment he is very awake to the situation around him, so that he doesn't become entangled in it. If you are not alert as you sit there, if you don't sit in just the proper way, you will also be caught and covered. And yet you do not run away from it. You sit right under it, doing tapas. What is tapas? In the Bhagavad Gita, certain examples of tapas are given. For instance, I have these hands with which I can wreak a lot of destruction. I can also use them to create beneficial things or to help others. When my actions are withdrawn from anything negative and my potentials are allowed to operate for the well-being of the world and to contribute to the perennial virtues of life, it is a tapas or ascetic discipline of the body. Likewise, I can use my tongue to fabricate many lies, manipulate the minds of people, create difficult situations, cause agony for others, make two people quarrel or make whole groups of people fight. I can become a pedagogue of the streets, cause mass movements and revolutions and bloodshed, even create a situation where one country goes to war with another or start a world war. The great war of the Mahabharata, in which so many people were killed, began with one man, Yudhishthira. He was challenged to gamble. With a rightful stand, he should have said, "No, I don't want to gamble." But he said, "Okay." From that simple beginning, the whole war started. A woman was ill-treated during the gambling, and she said to her husband Arjuna, "I will not tie the knot of my hair until you tie it with the blood of the man who mistreated me." So he promised her, and for the fulfillment of that vow, the great war was fought. The Ramayana is similar. Sita asked Rama to go and get a golden deer. Lakshmana was protecting her, but she abused him and sent him away. Then Ravana came and kidnapped her, and the whole epic began. These are instances where the words used cause great misunderstandings and tragedies. On the other hand, we have Sophia or Saraswati, the goddess of wisdom, and Vagdevi, the goddess of the word. With them, words are rarely used. When they are, it is to console or inspire someone, to express a noble idea, to bring about something beautiful. They are used for a friendly assurance or to give courage. When we use our words only for these purposes, otherwise keeping silent, we are said to be doing tapas with our tongue or our word. When the mind is withdrawn from all the horizontalizations of life and is geared to a perception of higher truth and the manifestation of its beauty, we are doing tapas with our mind. The contemplative who is sitting quietly under the tree is not just wasting his time. Although he looks somewhat unconcerned, he is actually engaged, concerned with everyone and everything. He is full of love and full of consideration. If he wants to be able to save anyone, he has to keep from being entangled in the creeper, to keep himself detached. If 3 people are drowning and a 4th takes pity on them and swims into the middle of the 3, they will catch hold of him from 3 sides and all 4 will drown. So he needs to do it intelligently. First take one to safety and then going back for the next. Only chance determines whether he can save all 3. At least he won't be killed along with them. Your compassion should be such that you are not caught in a snare in the name of compassion. You have to detach yourself. Martin Luther King spoke of having a cause for which you are willing to die. We want to change that to a cause for which you are willing to live. Dying is not a great virtue. Living is the great virtue, and not only living now, but living forever. Have you ever noticed that when you dream, you can be conscious of the dream being a dream, but that awareness does not prevent the dream from manifesting? You cannot get out of the dream until it is over, even when you know you are dreaming. A dream may be very fascinating, though, or very eerie. Anything can happen in it, but it does not overwhelm us, because we know it will vanish as soon as we wake up. Our wakeful life can be very similar. Things may look so important, but there is another consciousness which says, the world is like that, and it is just a passing phenomenon. We really cannot do anything about it. This aspect of consciousness is symbolized by the person who is sitting under the tree. We are the tree. There is no other. In this tree, time and space are getting filled by our wakeful experience on our side and our dreams on the other. They are both originating from our own deep unconscious. While this is going on, the witnessing aspect of consciousness is removed from it and made to sit contemplatively under the same tree, watching the many events of life taking place. This is the imagery of the verse. Look for the creeper within you, which is blossoming as your wakeful life hour after hour. Watch for your fantasizing aspect that is blooming in another direction. Also examine the root, the seed of all this in your transactions, in the wakeful and in your fantasies. Decide how much total participation you should have in these two kinds of functioning. If you involve yourself too much, it will pinch you. That pinching is here called narakam, hell. Now turn inward and watch the silent depth of the unconscious. See how from that depth into which we cannot penetrate, ideas spring up, concepts come as mental pictures. However much we try, we cannot go beyond a certain limit of consciousness to fathom the depth from which these thoughts and images come. Now add to that unconscious depth the many autonomic functions going on in the body of which we do not know anything. Either by studying textbooks we know the inferential guesses made by people who call themselves scientists about what they think the functions of the kidneys, pancreas, and many other vital organs are. But we are nonetheless ignorant about the reality of those functions. We are, though, conscious of our breathing. Although respiration goes on most of the time without our being aware of it, we can do it consciously. Yet we cannot consciously hold our breath for a long time. Something beyond our consciousness compels us to give up that deliberation. A struggle of life and death comes, and we are forced to live. When we add the unconscious in us to the unknown in us, the sum total remains at the causal source. We have as its counterpart our conscious experiences and also those aspects of our behavior pattern which we do deliberately. There are aspects of our psychophysical organism that are known, and there are conscious reasonings, sensations, and volitions. Putting together the conscious and the known with the unconscious and unknown, we get a total picture of our individuation. Let us go a step further. Retrospectively look into your life and recognize certain emotional patterns, beliefs, ways of looking at life, and the like, which are similar or identical with those of your parents. Also consider the skills and talents you have learned from them. Next, call to your mind whatever you know of your parents, such as their physical form, voices, special mannerisms, and skills. Consider certain of their behavioral patterns, their beliefs and prejudices, which make no sense to you. We very much want them to behave differently, think differently, or have different beliefs, but they are holding on to patterns we do not appreciate. We really do not know anything of their motivations, what is going on within them. We also do not know the genetic similarity they have with our grandparents and great-grandparents. Now we have a conscious picture of the continuation of the life of our parents in us. When all this is added up, you will find an extension or extrapolation of the unconscious causal factors in you. You can see the depth of that unconscious time-wise, ranging back through the millennia of the evolution of life. This gives us some idea of the depth of the unconscious, which we experience here and now within ourselves. Next, call to your mind a picture of the world. What is it that we call world? The world map may come to mind. Some of the recent satellite photographs of Earth may also come up. We may review pictures we have seen in astrophysics texts, ranging from formations of nebulae to the various constellations of the Milky Way. our own solar system and the planetary systems. Then we think of the Earth itself with its oceans, mountains, political regions, and national boundaries, and the historical rise and fall of cultures, dynasties, and civilizations. Our present moment is structured out of all this. But apart from the concepts, do we know anything about the reality behind these images and pictures? No, we don't. So first we pictured the depth of the unconscious, and now we have a peripheral vision of the horizontal breadth that is historical, geographical, mythological, and legendary. It is the world we appreciate poetically and aesthetically, the world we love and abhor, the world where we feel roots, and the world we want to demolish, change, reform. Now place yourself as an individual in that world, which has a peripheral dimension of many conceptual images and also a great depth of the unconscious, extending from you to the very origin of the universe. What you are now doing is an act of witnessing. Experience this aspect of consciousness calmly and uniformly, with no special interest. Just watch it and see it. Then compare this neutral state of mind to your consciousness when you very badly want to do something. See how enthusiastic you become, how much energy you put into it, how your whole system becomes animated with that enthusiasm. This is to be distinguished from the witnessing consciousness. Whenever we are self-pitying or when we are enjoying all the changing, passing states of mind, this one consciousness is always looking on. It is never affected. Some other aspect of us gets affected and afflicted, and the witness sees how we are afflicted. All this is pictured in the allegory of a tree covered with a blossoming creeper which has two vines. One vine represents the perceptual order of our conscious wakeful transactions, the other the conceptual order including all our subjective fantasizing and imagination. The depth we have referred to is understood as the seed of the creeper. Its flowers are our individual experiences, which have become permanent expressions, as well as what we have taken on from the recorded experience of mankind in the form of history, art, literature, and all the manifestations of human workmanship, like the formation of cities and monuments. The person sitting under the tree symbolizes that tiny bit of consciousness that witnesses the unfolding of life all about itself. Compared to that, the witnessing consciousness is like a shimmering star, lost in an oceanic universe of conglomerations. There is every chance of losing track of it at any time. Although it looks insignificant, it is the center on which all activities of our life find their ground and their motivation. Long ago in bucolic India, it was not uncommon for people to sit under a tree in contemplation. Nowadays, this can only happen in ideal situations. When we try to locate that very peaceful witnessing center, we become aware of a terrible noise and a kind of restlessness in the atmosphere. When this kind of demand is made on the senses and the mind, it can evoke in us many strange emotions tied up with our latent potentials and incipient memories. Our curiosity is aroused and we become distracted. It is a real struggle to keep our balance and remain in absolute resonance with the passivity of the center. We sit for 5 minutes waiting for the noise to quit or go away. Then we become impatient. We get up and go to investigate and become entangled in whatever is going on. But for one who wants to go deeper into the reality of the self, this is to be taken as a real challenge. How much forbearance can you cultivate, and how are you to remain unruffled in spite of the situation? Our vulnerability to distraction produced the element of exasperation we noticed in verse 7. There the Guru points out that the many demands of nature, such as sleeping, waking, eating, mating, and so on, come to us continuously. This flux leaves us little chance to know the changeless reality in which all the changes are mirrored. Yet, while the mirror may be filled with many turbulences of the external world, it remains unaffected. Similarly, your pure witnessing consciousness, while seemingly being modified, really does not undergo any modification. In verse 8, the Guru recommended a rather drastic attitude to refocus our contemplation, which can bring it to a position of great stability as exemplified in the present verse by the contemplative beneath the tree. The challenge here is both real and unreal. It is unreal in the sense that it comes and goes, but it is real in the sense that it can cause genetic propensities to perpetuate whatever misery and joy we experienced as individuated beings. The psychophysical organism used as a tool by the unknown definitely undergoes substantial change, and it persists even beyond the individual's lifetime. Biologically, it is proliferated and continued from generation to generation. This is why the Guru said, "Oh, who is there to know this unmodified state of the self?" Then he brought us to an enigmatic situation where we have two definite alternatives. One is to go beyond all these transient changes, to identify with the changeless and remain as that knowledge, Arivam. As verse 7 pointed out, this is not at all easy for most of us. And if it is not possible to do it, we should then turn to those who have succeeded, established bipolarity with them, and through that bipolarity also attain to the changeless state. The instructions of verse 8 is to adopt a drastic attitude. You should not allow your mind to be like a wandering dog in the street. You should become its master. This little awareness, which is just witnessing, has in it at least the potential for omniscience. In most of us, the omniscience of the witnessing element is a bit like the United Nations. The UN sees what is going on all over the world, but it has no power to stop a nation from indulging in any stupidity. It can only advise, don't do it. We also have a unified notion in the omniscient witness in us, which sees everything. If we cultivate it, if we give it a volitional power, it would be like handing over all the world's militaries to the United Nations and give it a mandate over the so-called sovereignty of the individual state. It would then be able to prevent atrocities. This could actually happen, but at present it does not. There are certain individuals, though, who do practice it. They combine their witnessing consciousness with their volitional consciousness. This is extremely effective as long as the witnessing consciousness is established on a normative notion of good for all, highest beauty, supreme truth, and unlimited commitment. There is an element of fakery and deception when a preconceived, prefabricated version of life is presented to us. It disguises the essential true nature behind it. Freud and people like him did great service to humanity by pointing out that the whole situation and the people who are confronted by situations wear masks, and we should tear them away in order to be fully alive. When you are centered in the witnessing consciousness, you can clearly see the painted masks borne by people and events. Very few people, however, know the nature of the reality hidden behind them. We are here in a search to see what is behind the masks. What is immediately behind them are the very many urges which we call incipient memories or vasanas. For these forces, defense is absolutely necessary, and the mask itself is the defense mechanism. Unfortunately, while these masks protect society, they also blindfold the individual from seeing his own reality. In the present verse, Narayana Guru implores us to come out of the deluding situation, to sit outside it and watch the game. Once your mask is gone, it is easy for the witnessing consciousness to establish itself on the ground of an absolutist norm, such as universal truth, universal goodness, universal beauty. That's why he said, the person sitting under the terrible tree can do tapas. The need to be austere was already suggested in verse 8. Here the austerity is made a permanent feature and not just a single action. The single act of bringing down the birds progresses to a habitual performance of tapas. Many methods have been taught by the great masters to achieve detachment from the ensnaring creepers of the world tree and to cultivate an absolutist vision which can turn individuation into a tool to serve the purpose of higher truth, goodness, and beauty. The Buddha said we should have the right mode of seeing, of thinking, speaking, of behaving, of feeling. How does one find the right mode? By taking refuge in the Buddha, by taking refuge in the fourfold truth, by cultivating the five virtues. In the morning, a Buddhist monk gets up and repeats 3 times that he has taken refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Then he takes 5 pledges. I take the vow that with this hand of mine I will never hurt any sentient being. I take the pledge that I will not grab anything which does not come to me as benevolently apportioned by nature. I take the pledge that I will not waste even a second in worthless talk or gossip. I will not allow desires to take me out of the path of righteousness. I will always stick by the right path. I will not allow any kind of narcotics or addictive substances to pollute the comprehension of my mind. Then he will study the scriptures in the company of his fellow monks, probing deeply into the life and teachings of the Buddha. This is one way to detach oneself from the entanglements of the world and become liberated. There are many others. Another way is to walk into the open arms of Jesus Christ and feel the warmth of His love in your heart. He says, listen to the word of my Father. Listen to the word which comforts and saves. He enunciates the nature of the kingdom of God and how one qualifies to enter it. Then he gives the assurance that he will show us the path and the goal, the light and the life, death and resurrection. Or you can take the Islamic way, which is so beautifully given to us by the Sufis, of making Allah your beloved. Lao Tzu exemplifies the witnessing self, which remains at the neutral zero. A most wonderful way is to examine the paradoxes of life and try to understand their inner cohesion. Still another way, which is, as the rishis have taught, from ancient times down to, say, Ramana Maharishi in our own time, they have all taken the question, who am I, and diligently followed the track of where it led them. That path took them away from all the superficial disturbances to the pure light, which we have just now placed under the tree as the contemplative witness. Such a seer is by no means a derelict, though those preoccupied with masks and surfaces might call him one. In terms of value, he is working harder and more effectively than most very busy people. He is exercising and experiencing great purification. There are really only three states: the waking, the dreaming, and the unconscious. Witnessing is not a state in itself, or avastha. It is the one which is seeing all the states. It is more like a catalyst in bringing dramatic changes to them. From now on, we will be concentrating our attention on knowing more of this witnessing self, which can detach itself from the three aspects of consciousness and remain pure. And the free translation of this verse is, the phenomenal world is like a tree whose truth is concealed by a mysterious creeper spread out in two directions and overladen with flowers. Living in the shade of this tree, a disciplined contemplative escapes the temptations that might otherwise lead to tragic consequences.